On Tech News Today, we'll tell you what's hot and what's not from yesterday's Apple event. Plus, Apple left one more thing out of the announcement. We'll tell you all about it. And what's up with the Guardian's Whisper campaign? It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, October 17th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Prosper. Prosper is a peer-to-peer lending marketplace that connects people who are looking to borrow money with those who have money to lend. Visit prosper.com/twit and receive a $50 Visa prepaid card when you get a loan. And by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan. And Jason Howell, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
You've
got a
really,
huge
really
trip
good.
coming up.
I do, going to the Middle East, going to Jordan for the first time in my life.
Man,
looking
that's
forward to
awesome.
that. So that's going to be exciting. Next week, Leo and Sarah are going to be filling in for me, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And, I wanted to ask you about something. I meant to ask you about this the other day, but you are now using the new poll feature on Google Plus for All About Androids. You've been doing polls for a long time, but now you're using Google Plus. How's that working out?
Well, we tried it for the first time. So for All About Android, we have the Android Arena, which is where everybody that's on for an episode brings an app to the table, and we all kind of review it on the show. Can't ever have been on the show before. And then we let the fans of the show vote on their favorite app of the week. And we've been using various different polling methods before. Got about 300, 400, 500 votes total per week, I'd say on average. Google Plus polling first time this week. We tried it out. It's already up to 2,000 votes. It's crazy. The response is incredible. And I think that's just because it surfaces in the feed so easily, and it's so easy to just on a whim, take action on it and everything. So we'll definitely be using it going forward. It's really effective.
One thing that I haven't found out on my own yet, so I'll just ask you. Of course, a public post on Google Plus is just a page on the internet, and to vote, do you actually need to be logged into Google Plus, or
yes,
can anybody do it? You do, okay.
Anybody can look at the poll, but if you want to actually vote, you have to be logged in.
Good to know.
Yep, and there's only one vote that registers for you. So even if it's been shared across all of these, if it kind of goes viral in its own sense and people are resharing the poll and you see it in different places, you can change your vote, and it kind of looks like you're making more than one vote as you do that, but it's actually only counting as one. So it's pretty effective. You just having the account is kind of the bummer on that. You have to have an account, but keeps it honest.
Yeah, it's probably a good feature. Well, we also have with us as our co-anchor, Christina Warren. Welcome to you, Christina.
Hello. Good morning or good afternoon. I'm not even sure what time it is. So good afternoon.
I think it's morning for me and afternoon for you.
Basically.
Or morning for you if you get up late. So how excited are you about Apple Pay? Do you think this is going to be a huge launch, or will it take a while for this to really take off?
Oh, no, this is going to be so huge. You don't even know how excited I am. So I, like all of my credit cards and my banks already work with Apple Pay. So on Monday, I will be able to add Apple Pay and get rid of my credit cards from at least having to carry my wallet around. No, I think it's going to be big. Obviously it'll take some time, I think, for training and for maybe some adoption to kick in. But I think one of the things that is great about Apple being late to the NFC game, certainly, compared to Nokia going way back and to Android most definitely, is that they are coming at it with a really good partnership. So I was on the phone with MasterCard yesterday, and they were telling me that before they announced Apple Pay, and MasterCard is, obviously supported as its Visa and American Express, before it was announced, about 80% of consumers were represented by the banks that had signed on under NDA. And since Apple Pay was announced, another 500 have signed up. So there's going to be a huge number of banks that are supported, which is right now one of the big problems, as well as all kinds of retailers. So you've got, Staples and Starbucks and Target and, Whole Foods and, the Apple Store, obviously. So, McDonald's. And what's cool is because it works with a lot of these systems that have had NFC for a long time, maybe haven't been enabled, like Staples is basically turning on NFC just for Apple Pay. This will trickle down for Android users too, because if you have all the right gyrations working out, if the secure element is supported by, your carrier, and if you've got other stuff going on that'll work with your bank, then you can also continue to use this contactless stuff. So I'm super, super stoked.
I'm always confused about why only Apple can do this kind of thing. In other words, sort of get the whole industry, everybody involved, singing from the same hymn book and moving forward and having a big splashy launch like this. I mean, why can't Google do something like this? Android is by far the world's biggest operating system in the U.S. It's, it's not as dominated as it is globally, but they're a huge company with billions of dollars and lots of influence and lots of services everywhere, and it's so valuable to them. It would be so valuable for the de facto system to be Google's. Why doesn't Google, or why can't Google do this kind of splashy launch for something as important as payments?
Well, I think the big thing is that, Apple has a brand identity and has the fact that they are one of the few companies in the world that they release something and people will buy it opening week and people will line up. I mean, we make fun of it. Some of us partake in it, but they're one of the few people that will do that, right? Google, the Motorola thing notwithstanding, doesn't make its own hardware. It partners with hardware people, but it doesn't make its own. And what they learned with the Nexus 1, which, the Nexus S, I guess, which was the one that had NFC, and they were trying to get, Google Wallet to take off. They, unfortunately, Google wanted to control the secure element. And I think Apple, in some ways, as brazen as Apple is in a lot of cases and isn't willing to work well with others, when it comes to something like payments, they wanted to make sure they had all the pieces there. So they went to all the payment companies, they went to the banks, they dealt with the issue of the secure element and were able to put everybody's concerns aside, whereas Google wanted to control that secure element. Meanwhile, the carriers did too, and they didn't really get all the stakeholders in the same room and say, this is how we do it. So I think, it's not that Google couldn't conceivably do it, it's that Apple will refuse to launch something until they have all those pieces together. And because Apple, even though Google is dominant, as you said, with Android, when it comes to people who have money, especially something like payments, Apple is actually going to have a bigger potential spend there because they've got, they sold 20 million. People are now predicting that 30 million iPhone Plus and iPhone 6s are now out in the wild. That's a huge number of devices for only less than a month. And any single Android model phone would have a hard time reaching that. I don't think any have. So I think it's just kind of a matter of scale and the fact that Apple, for whatever reason, they have this factor about them. They will make sure that all those pieces are in place before they launch something, and that's usually why it works, because they've already guaranteed that in order for it to work, you don't have to do a lot of gyrations and go through a bunch of hoops, which is what you had to do with Google Wallet. And I used Google Wallet. I reviewed it. It's funny, I was talking to MasterCard, the same people that I was talking to 3 years ago with Google Wallet, showing off some of the same sorts of functionalities. The only difference is that this time, there are a lot more retailers on board. And obviously, the biggest thing is that the banks are on board. And that was a really, really problematic thing beforehand. I think the timing is better for Apple, too. And that's really, luck on their part, but I don't know. So that's my long-winded answer for that.
Yeah, I think that's really got to be exactly right. And I always imagine Google going to financial services like a bunch of goofy kids saying, hey, we could really do this really awesome thing. What do you think? And then Apple going in there and it's like the Godfather, making them an offer they can't refuse. Never go against the family. It's like, it's going to happen. It's really our way or the highway. And you really don't want to be on the wrong side of that. I mean, look what they did with music in the early 2000s. You don't want to be outside of iTunes when the revolution hit. So it's probably something like that. Well, let's jump into the big news. Of course, Apple announced a small range of new products, overall more of a refresh of existing lines than the introduction of something new. We got a Mashable Fest today. Chris Taylor is the deputy editor for Mashable, and Karissa Bell is a reporter for Mashable, and of course, Christina Warren is at Mashable as well. Welcome to the Mash Fest.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Welcome to the Mash.
Hello, fellow Mashers.
Well, Chris, we'll start with you. You called the event the most underwhelming example of Apple stagecraft since Gil Amelio was CEO in 1997. Ouch. Why was the event a dull flop, in your opinion?
Them's fighting words. And indeed, several Apple fans have taken me to task for it. No, I got the sense that Apple was kind of exhausted and a little hungover as a company from the iPhone launch last month, which, let us not forget, that was basically 5 weeks ago. And here they are coming back to tell us about yet more products. And I think you just see a sense of fatigue. The size of the theater they showed off these products in was much smaller. Everything about the event was smaller. We didn't have a big splashy U2 ending. It was just, hey, here are some new iPads, and they're not very different, except the camera is a little different. So we'll talk about people taking photos on iPads, even though I'm still dubious as to how large a market that is. But Apple seems to think it's pretty huge. So I don't know. They underwhelmed in a lot of areas, partly because we have set such a high bar for Apple, and they have set such a high bar for themselves in terms of stagecraft. Tim Cook has been able to continue the Steve Jobs legacy for many years in his keynotes, partly by ceding the stage to other executives who've come on. And, Craig Federighi has of course been dubbed Superman by Tim Cook for his performance at WWDC. We of course have Phil Schiller. He's usually the big cheerleader for Apple. None of these guys were really on their game yesterday, I thought. If we're going to score this as sort of an Olympic event, which I think, Apple invites us to do. This is supposed to be their strength. I've had several people after the opinion piece I wrote yesterday say, well, would you review other tech events like this? And of course I wouldn't, because no one else is doing tech events in the same way that Apple is. You don't go to a Samsung launch expecting the reality distortion field that we traditionally get with Apple, but they've set themselves up for this, and it's been a characteristic of the Tim Cook era that they're not adapting or evolving necessarily as fast as they were. We've had to wait 5 years for Apple to enter a new product category with the Apple Watch. Or will be 5 years by the time it launches. So yeah, I sense a certain fatigue, a certain tech companies get too comfortable sometimes. This is what happened with Microsoft. They were on top of the world, and they sort of rested on their laurels a little bit. And that is my fear with Apple. I say this as an Apple fanboy. I have my iPhone. I'm a paid-up card-carrying member of the Apple fanboys. So, I'm giving them a hard time because I love them so much. But yeah, I really, especially from outside the reality distortion field, because I was not actually covering this one from inside, where, I know from Apple events past, if you're actually sitting there in the theater, you have a whole different perspective than if you're watching it on the live stream. So, seeing it from outside is always a little bit different. But, we can be glad that the live stream worked, at least. That was one win for Apple yesterday.
And in English, too.
No Chinese translators, no little Twitter bug at the bottom of the screen, which is apparently what broke everything last time. Yep. So, yeah.
Now, Apple, of course, obsesses over thinness. The iPad Air 2 is thinner than a pencil. They used a laser beam to chop a pencil up to show how thin it is. Karissa Bell, do you think that people care about this as much as Apple does? I mean, I'd take another 5 hours of battery life over an extra millimeter of thinness.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is, they're really trying to show that they're, doing something new and still, like, pushing it and making, the new iPads actually something worth buying compared with, maybe just like the old ones. And, also when they make it so much thinner, that, they are shedding weight too, which I think was always a big concern with tablets, that you don't want what you're carrying around to be, heavy, and you want it to be light. So, yeah, I think in that respect that it is worth it. Although, extra 5 hours of battery life would also be a game changer, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of amazing how little change there was really between these iPads. I think that's another reason why it was underwhelming. The iPad Mini 3, what's the difference there? The camera is slightly different. It has Touch ID.
It has Touch IDs. That's the only difference. The camera's the same. The processor's the same. Everything about it is the same. Oh, it's gold and it has Touch ID, and that's it. That's what you get for $100. Like, can we talk about that? Like, that's insane. Do you think that was a big miss, Chris?
Absolutely. I mean, and the fact that they just sort of shoved it into the end of the iPad announcement. It's like, oh yeah, and we got this.
It was an afterthought.
pay no attention to the iPad Mini behind the screen.
Well, as I wrote last week, the iPad Mini is the new iPod Touch, and that just proved it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess with the 6 Plus, trying to be a mini iPad Mini, you don't want to draw too much attention to it, or you want to make people think it's a slightly bigger phablet, and here you have it. I don't know. They've sort of come to the end of the line here, I think, in a lot of respects. I mean, the iPad Air 2 is thinner, but I believe it's the same weight as the previous iPad Air, so they haven't actually.
No, it is actually slightly lighter. What looks like basically what they did is they trimmed, it's about 20% thinner. They trimmed a few millimeters off of it, and then they changed the way they do the screen so that somebody joked on Twitter, and I think they're right, literally sucked the air out. So they've now got that gap-free display, the same that they have it on the iPhone 6, and they've had since, I guess, like the iPhone 4, where like the screen is laminated and kind of sucked, so it looks like the pixels are like sitting on top of the glass. That's what they've done with the iPad Mini 3, iPad Air 2. So it is a little bit lighter, but not much. But
right, it's a matter of grams. It's
exactly.
A few grams.
Exactly, and I think it's probably mostly a factor of the components still weigh the same. They just managed to get the form factor slightly smaller, but it's probably still the same component. So probably literally what they did do was suck out whatever weight the air was in between the glass, and that's probably what's the difference in weight.
What you're saying that their screen manufacturing process sucks is what you're saying, basically.
No, do not quote me on that.
So I have a theory about that. I mean, I think that Apple has really gone out of their way to make sure that the high-end version of every single product category, in the case of iPads, the different sizes, is significantly and materially superior in some way other than size or something like that. So, for example, now on the iMac, only the 27-inch highest end one has Retina. On the iPhones, only the 6 Plus has the image stabilization and some of the user interface features that are clearly superior. I think that they know that there's a huge number of people, especially among their competitors, who just want the best. Kind of like the guy that Conan O'Brien had as the guy in charge of the gold version of the iPhone for the iPhone 5. It's the best. People want the best, and they're going to charge like $50 extra just because it's the top of the line, and I think they'll get it. I think that's a strategy that they seem to have.
No, you're dead on. I mean, I remember you guys remember the black MacBooks, the black books?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's still my favorite laptop ever. And that was one of those things where literally it costs more money to get a black MacBook than to do an identically configured white MacBook, like custom to order. We called it the black tax. And people call us stupid, but people like myself paid hook, line, and sinker. And you're absolutely right. There are people who just want the best. They want the color, they want the Touch ID, they want whatever. And Apple is one of the few people who will actually go out of their way to give it to them.
What else was interesting about this, Chris Taylor, that they announced that you were surprised by or that you were thrilled by? Was there anything in there that was kind of exciting in any way?
Well, you just mentioned the Retina iMac 5K, which I think is a very desirable object, and I'm already ready to throw my money in Apple's direction for that one.
So you criticize them, and then you're like, but still take my money.
But it was, it's the stagecraft of it. I mean, they sort of gave the Retina 5K 5 minutes at the end, basically, when it should have been. It was the best thing on the stage yesterday. It was the best thing they had to show off. And yeah, Mac isn't as big a deal in terms of sales compared to the iPad, although given the flattening of iPad sales, maybe it may not be too long before they're in the same category.
See, so what you're saying is that talk about the most exciting feature instead of 35 minutes of rehashing the September announcement. Is that what you're saying?
So much rehashing. Yes. I mean, how many times are we going to hear about Yosemite? I know it was launching yesterday, but I failed to get excited about that launch. I mean, usually when they have that big reveal and it's available right now, then I'm thrilled and I'm rushing off to download it. This time it was just like, thank God the Yosemite segment is over. Thank God they've stopped talking about iOS 8. And that was really weird. The problems with iOS 8.01, to kind of sort of jokingly acknowledge them, but not really acknowledge them, that was bizarre. To throw in the Mac Mini stuff at the end, again, we've been waiting for a Mac Mini refresh for a long time. And indeed, a lot of commenters have suggested that that's what they were referring to when they said
too long. Yeah.
It's been too long, which is like, okay, if that's the the pun in your invite, then maybe you should front load it with that. I mean, why not try something different? Why not put the Macs up front?
Yeah, think different, Apple.
We will stick around. Yeah. We'll still be there. We're not going to walk out of the theater. We're not going to stop the live stream if you don't rehash the OS stuff first.
I think
that's why they had to rehash it, Chris, because nobody was able to watch it the first time.
Yeah, exactly right. Here's what you missed if you watched the last one. So very quickly, Karissa Bell, I want to ask you about 3 giant chunks of information that were missing or expected products that were not announced. One of them is the ship date for the Apple Watch. They didn't announce that, right? Any indication about Apple's plans for Apple TV? Talk about it's been far too long. And the MacBook Air with Retina. Where are these products? Where is this information, Karissa Bell? Why didn't they talk about these things?
Well, on the MacBook side, I mean, I think that was due to delays that have been documented with Intel's process, and they're behind on their chips. So I think we kind of knew going in that we probably weren't going to be seeing any new MacBooks today. As far as the Apple Watch, yeah, that was kind of mysterious. They had the whole update about WatchKit and how they're going to be releasing the SDK soon, but they didn't really talk about exactly when we're going to see it. I think they're still just saying the early 2015 date. And yeah, Apple TV, that's an interesting one too. I did see something on Twitter that I thought was interesting, where someone made a comment about whether, maybe they could somehow bring 5K into the Apple TV at some point, whether this iMac announcement was like a signal of what's to come with Apple TV.
Well, and it has to be said, even though we're grousing about the announcement, and it's not Steve Jobs' announcement, and it's really problematic. And I think we didn't mention the way that Tim Cook increasingly talks. The more excited he gets, the slower he talks. It's like the whisper. He clobbers you with his slow whisper. That's kind of his style. It's almost
true.
like
It's so true.
It's almost like a religious ceremony of some kind. Maybe it is for Tim Cook.
You're like, did he forget what he was going to say? Oh no,
Exactly.
here it is. Okay,
that's right. But it has to be said, despite all the colossal disappointment that we annoying pundits have about this thing, the fact is that iMac, 27-inch iMac for Retina is butter, man. That thing is like exactly, their tablets are probably the best. Their phones are up there in the top 3 easily. I mean, this is some great stuff. And it's amazing how such a masterful company in terms of presentations can disappoint so many people about such great products.
Well, I squealed like a little girl when they announced the 5K iMac. I did. I literally, I was like listening. We were all in a big conference room, and I started squealing like a little girl for the 5K iMac. I won't lie.
Yeah, okay.
The fact that, the whole industry is talking 4K, and then Apple comes along and says, no, we're going to do 5K.
It goes to 11.
And I'm sure I'm sure we're going to see 6K announcements at CES, just based on this. But it's an example that there is still innovation there. They can still do it. And we push them because we love them. We want them to do more. We want them to be greater. They are the best tech company in the world today. And, we don't want them to get too comfortable in there, too comfortable with their products and their profits.
Absolutely. So, Mash Pit, why don't you guys stick around? I'm going to do an ad because I got to get this ad in the top of the show. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a really interesting product, probably the most interesting product of the day in some respects that Apple didn't even announce. But first, let's talk about Prosper. Prosper is one of our sponsors today. What could you do with $35,000? You could go to the Apple Store and buy a lot of really good equipment for your business or for yourself. You could shower Christina Warren with Apple gifts and to make her squeal like a little girl again. And you could remodel your kitchen. You could start a new business. You could pay off your credit cards. There's so much you could do. But who wants to work with these banks? This is Silicon Valley's answer to financing things. Prosper offers low fixed rate loans, unsecured personal loans, no collateral required, and has multi-year terms available. If you're wondering about Prosper and just want to check it out, you can go to prosper.com/twit. You can check your rate instantly, and this won't even affect your credit score. So this is a really great benefit that if you want to kick the tires and just see what it's all about, you can do that. Prosper has more than 2 million members and over $1 billion in funded loans. For a limited time, Prosper is offering viewers and audience members of this show a $50 Visa prepaid card when you get a loan. Just go to prosper.com/twit, and that's a special site just for our audience. Up to $35,000 in just 3 days and a $50 Visa prepaid card. Go to prosper.com/twit. Well, let's talk about the Apple SIM. Apple rolled out but did not announce at its event a new SIM card called the Apple SIM. According to a statement buried at the bottom of one of its iPad web pages, the Apple SIM gives users the flexibility to choose from a variety of short-term carrier plans. In other words, a single SIM can be used on AT&T or Sprint, and the choice can be made by the user by simply selecting the carrier from a dialog box. So, Chris Taylor, what did you think about this? This is interesting in two counts. First of all, it's a really simple solution to a problem that people have, which is the inconvenience of swapping out cards. And secondly, they didn't even utter a peep about it at their announcement.
That's the other thing that's so strange. I mean, we all found this out, I think, within a few minutes of the Apple event ending. You know, it started lighting up the blogs, and we're all like, why did we just sit through, you know, half a keynote full of rehashed content when this could have been a fascinating discussion about carriers and about the about switching between carriers and the inconvenience of it. You know, why not? If you've got the technology, why not show it off? Why not talk about it? So that was a very bizarre decision. But you know, I'm pleased that they've done it. I'm pleased that we are increasingly moving towards the day where it just doesn't matter. You know, of course, Wi-Fi calling is another aspect of this. That you know, it's the kind of thing you have to think about less. The famous Apple mantra is "it just works," and I want it to just work. I don't want to have to think about carriers at all if I can manage it.
Sure, but the carriers do want you to think about that. Forbes' Parmi Olson says the carrier objection to the idea is why Apple didn't mention it. Christina Warren, do you agree with that? Do you think the carriers are kind of freaked out by this idea?
Oh, absolutely. No, I was going to say there's a very simple reason why they didn't mention it and they buried it, and that's because they don't want to piss off their carrier partners. And Apple, I mean, this is one of those things, you know, they go against the grain and they can piss off a lot of people, but when it comes down to it, they know not to go over the line. And making a comment like, oh, it'll be so easy to switch to another carrier. I mean, John Legere, who I love him. He's my favorite CEO from T-Mobile, would probably be thrilled if they said something like that because you know he could play it up. But I think that obviously Verizon, AT&T, Sprint would not be. And I also think that's probably why it doesn't work on Verizon. I'm not sure if that's a technical challenge. Technically, they could, you know, make it work just for the LTE side, for the SIM side, but it wouldn't have the drop downs to CDMA. But I guess, you know, I guess that's what Sprint is doing. But I guess, you know, Verizon just, you know, they want everybody to be in the Verizon bubble. I don't know.
Yeah. The Next Web's Ben Woods points out that these kinds of multi-carrier SIMs have existed for years in markets like Pakistan and India, but they were really cumbersome to use, and Apple took the idea and made it simpler and convenient compared to how it works in those countries. Now, Karissa, do you think that there's any part of Apple's approach to this that is patentable? Is this technology or is this just policy?
I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll have to, you know, wait and see how it plays out. I think that, you know, with Apple, I think that their move is they will try, if it is patentable, then we will probably see them try to patent it because I kind of feel like that's, you know, sort of their MO on these things. But, you know, there are a lot of other, as you just mentioned, companies that are doing dual SIMs and doing a lot, especially globally, you know, using the same kind of technology. So it's definitely been done before, but I think that Apple, if they can, Apple will try to patent it probably.
Chris Taylor is the Future Boy on Twitter, not the Future Boy, just Future Boy. You can follow him on Twitter at Future Boy. And Karissa Bell is at Karissa BE on Twitter. And of course, both of them are at Mashable.com. Thank you both for joining us on Tech News Today.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure.
All right. Well, a Guardian report hit yesterday that slammed the anonymous messaging app Whisper for tracking users, harvesting their personal data, then sharing it with the Pentagon, among other things. Whisper slammed back, saying it doesn't follow or track users and accused the Guardian of publishing, quote, lousy falsehoods, unquote. Their defense is that while they monitor users, they don't retain personally identifiable information like names or phone numbers. Whisper did, however, quickly and extensively change their privacy policy statement. So, Christina Warren, that seems like they're a little guilty about that. They hit hard and they hit back and hit fast and hard, but, you know, they did change their policy pretty radically. What do you make of this whole controversy?
Yeah, well, I'll say up front. I mean, I believe the Guardian. I think that their reporting is likely accurate. It's possible that they maybe overstated or oversimplified some of the things that Whisper is doing. But and we've worked with Whisper a few times on certain stories. They've reached out to us wanting us to use information as a news data source. They've obviously worked with BuzzFeed. They've worked with other news organizations, and I know that they were doing a big push to do that sort of thing. And part of that is this idea that they can surface interesting whispers related to an idea, and to do that you would require the ability to do some sort of searching. It makes sense to me that their database is connected to a user, that they don't anonymize all points of the database. So while I think Whisper can probably accurately and say without lying, hey, no, we're not tracking users, we're not identifying them, that doesn't mean that they don't have a way to be able to see this user is in this location and potentially draw in an entire history of that user's information. Now that might mean that they don't know anything about who the user is on its face, but the data could let this person always has this schedule, is frequently mentions these things, is in this location, which could lead someone who has access to that information, which in this case would be Whisper, to validate the identity of who it is. And I mean, that's what this is where I think it's sort of interesting. Whisper's kind of wanting to say two things here. On the one hand, they're wanting to assure, users, no, your stuff is private. We don't know who you are. We're not tracking you. On the other hand, they're asking for people to share their geo-targeting information, because that can provide interesting concepts for other people, and it can obviously help surface things for news stories. But they're also saying when there is interesting news and when news breaks, like, the allegations that Gwyneth Paltrow, with her marriage and some other things are happening, they're saying that they can do what they can to vet sources. So how do you vet it? Well, the only way really to vet it would be to kind of look through the data trail of where else this user has been. Now, can you conclusively prove that this person is that person? Probably not, and that's probably how they can get away with saying that. But the fact remains that since the Guardian's report went up, they have substantially changed their privacy policy. And is it something that people who use Whisper should worry about? The average person, probably not, but it is problematic to me when they are kind of hard. To me, I have a problem, and I'm just speaking for myself here. I'm not speaking for my organization. I want to make that very clear. But to me, as a journalist, I do have a little bit of a problem with a company that is using a product like this to then try to create news sources of information from data that they claim is anonymized. Because to me, that kind of, there's just something about that that doesn't sit right with me. I'm not real comfortable with that idea. So
yeah, absolutely. And the Guardian pointed out a couple of examples. One of them is that the Whisper database people tracked Israeli defense forces on the front lines, 13 or 14 users of the Whisper service or the app, and they could tell who they were. They could tell that they were IDF forces by where they were. The location gave it all away. There was nobody else in that location. And of course, once they are following those people, they know that no matter where those people go, they can go back into the back into Israel. They can go wherever they go, and still they know it's the same user. They don't have a name or phone number, but they know it's an IDF person. Now this is national security stuff right here. Let's say they're complaining, grousing soldiers, oh, we're out of ammo or whatever. Somebody gets their hands on that. That's the kind of military intelligence for the other side that the NSA could only dream of sometimes. I mean, this is really serious stuff. Another example is they tracked a, quote, sex-obsessed lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Now, there's somebody you can blackmail or whatever if you got your hands on this data. So this is really disturbing. They get a lot of information out of geolocation. And in fact, they claim as part of their defense that their geolocation feature is both recent and optional. It's an opt-in feature. But the Guardian pointed out they can also find the general location of people through IP addresses, and that they do that. They actually get the location of people who have not opted in for the geolocation feature. So this is all very disturbing. There's some shady dealings here. For example, the privacy policy used to say that they would keep data only for a, quote, brief period of time, unquote. And in fact, they've kept the time and location of every message since they launched in 2012. That doesn't sound to me like a brief period of time.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And it's bothersome in the sense that, on the one hand, it might be good that they have this information if potentially, when I think about how law enforcement might want to use this, you could make the argument, and this is one of the things that is kind of ongoing, you probably talked about it yesterday with the FBI wanting the companies to install backdoors so that, security can have, intelligence can have access to things. Now, regardless of how you feel about that, I'm not sure, when you have a private company like this who's capturing this information, if they receive some sort of request from law enforcement agencies agency, and they're turning over IPs associated with something. I mean, I'm not sure how warrants would work in that case. If they say, you know, if they think that a user is involved in something, they find Whisper on their phone, can they then go to Whisper and say, we want all messages associated with this IP address? I'm not sure. And the fact that we don't know and that that's not conclusive opens up a lot of problems, especially, as you said, if people are tweeting about things from the military and there are, you know, potentially on the ground things, because that can be those sorts of situations can be much more easily tied to someone's identity than just, you know, grousing about, you know, a spouse or grousing about, you know, work in a generic term. That's likely, which I think is how most people are using Whisper, is not going to be personally identifiable. But the fact that they're tracking all of this stuff, they're keeping this stuff, as you said, you know, for 2 years, 2.5 years, however long they've been around, is problematic. And I don't, to me anyway, I don't believe that their response has really addressed those concerns at all.
I agree completely. And of course, there's also the issue of we don't know who's hacking them. And this, you know, Whisper, we don't have any evidence that they have amazing security that can keep out the NSA, the Chinese government, the Russian government, you know, blackmailing hackers from all over the world. And of course, you can take this data, it's raw data, it's probably in a nice format for this type of activity, and just apply it to sort of big data number crunching, and you don't know what kind of information they're going to be able to get from that. You recall it was beautifully illustrated in the movie Zero Dark 30 that they caught Osama bin Laden. They've pinpointed one single person by tracking the courier, and they found out he was the courier simply by the pattern of a person in Pakistan calling his mother. That's all they knew. They didn't know. I mean, that's all it took for them so you can get enormous amounts of data from very little bits of information, far less information that Whisper has access to. And so this is really disturbing information, and it's part of a larger trend that I see, Christina, of companies just trust themselves way too much. The OkCupids, the Facebooks, Google, Whisper, they all say, hey, Snapchat, perfect. They say, hey, we trust ourselves. We're not going to do anything bad with this data. We're just going to go ahead and harvest it all, keep it all, store it, and pass it around and sort of number crunch it. We're going to do experiments on it. No, what could go wrong?
No, I think you bring up an excellent point, and it makes me think, you know, about some of the Snapchat things that happened last week and earlier this week as well. And, you know, you think about, I think what bothers me here is that it's not, at least with companies like Facebook and Google and you know, Apple and some of these others, you know, Yahoo, Microsoft, at least you know that they have clear, you know, concise security infrastructures. B, it's not as if they're spreading themselves out to be the most secure place to share your private anonymized thoughts. That's sort of an issue with Whisper. I mean, if their whole MO is about this is the most anonymous way to share things, and then it's really not. I mean, it might be technically, but your information can still be tracked, and it's possible that it could lead back to you, as you said, you know, using the Zero Dark 30 example. That's sort of that rubs me the wrong way. The same way that Snapchat, even if they don't explicitly anymore say that it's a really easy way to have, you know, disappearing photos and ephemeral messages. The idea is that this is safe and secure to use. But then the reality is that if anybody's using a third-party app, they can probably be capturing everything you're doing and then share that with somebody else. And that kind of, you know, I think that for the users who are using these things, they're going into it with one expectation, and then the reality is very different. And the companies don't seem to care, at least in the cases of you know, Facebook and Google. You know, there are regulations and things they have to follow. They're public companies, but even before they were public, they had to follow certain, you know, data sanity sorts of things. Startups like Whisper really don't have to do that sort of thing. You know, Snapchat is being, you know, they have an agreement with the FTC because of their data policies, but that doesn't seem to have changed anything. So, you know, these startups start up so fast, and as you said, they're taking all this information, and then there's really no accountability about where it goes, and it could just be one great, you know, SQL table that somebody's able to grab somehow, and then you've got access to all of these coordinates, all of this information, and that could be used in a really interesting way or a really problematic way.
Yeah, absolutely right. You are absolutely right about all of that. Well, in just a second, we're going to do some really interesting follow-ups. But first, I want to tell you about Squarespace. I always ask people, why don't you have a website? And I get a lot of interesting responses. One, people think that they don't know how to do it, or if they do it, it'll be a lousy website and make them look bad. Secondly, they'll say, well, I don't really have any reason to. I don't, you know, I'm not publishing anything or whatever. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to publish. Another reason is that it might be expensive. Well, if you make if you have those reasons for not having a website, then you don't know enough about Squarespace. They tackle all of those objections. Squarespace websites are super easy to set up. They're beautiful. It's like impossible to build a non-beautiful website with Squarespace because you start with 25 beautiful templates, and automatically you have killer design. And you can go in there and modify it and change it and customize it to your heart's content. Later on, if you want to swap in a new template, you can just go ahead and do that, and everything you've built will remain in place while the new design comes flooding in. Easy to use. Tech support is 24/7. E-commerce available for all subscription plan levels, and it's just $8 a month at the starting price, and that includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. It's mobile ready. You can run the whole thing from your mobile device, and hosting is killer, and it's included, of course. It's legendary. You can't bring a Squarespace site down. Start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website. And when you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TNT to get 10% off and to show your support for this show. And we thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. And remember that a better web awaits, and it starts with your new Squarespace website. Well, in some follow-ups, Apple finally shipped its new iPhones in China today. Compared with previous iPhone launch, the crowds were pretty small, and the energy level was pretty low, according to most reports. The BBC announced plans to continually publish a list of BBC articles removed from Google searches under the right to be forgotten rule in order to protect the public's right to remember. More than 46 BBC links have so far been affected by the right to be forgotten process. The list goes live in the next few weeks, according to a BBC article. And Christina Warren, I don't know about you, but I hope that lots of other news sites do this as well. I think the rights, the public's right to remember, it has to be considered.
I totally agree. I remember when we spoke about this a few months ago, and I applaud the BBC for doing this. I think this is the exact right way to respond to this, and kudos to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we told you on previous episodes that the Twitter-centric photo sharing service TwitPic was being shut down. Then it was going to be saved by a buyer, but now we're back to tell you that no, it's going to be shut down. Twitter founder Noah Everett wrote on the company blog that, quote, "It's with a heavy heart that I announce again the TwitPic will be shutting down on October 25th. Amazon is expanding its grocery delivery service, Amazon Fresh, to Brooklyn's Park Slope neighborhood, and starting today. Are you anywhere near in this area? Christina Warren, you're in Brooklyn, right?
I am. Yes. So they're in Park Slope. They're coming to Park Slope. I'm in Prospect Heights, which is like one neighborhood away. So I won't be able to use Amazon Fresh, but we have Fresh Direct, which is very, very similar. And so that's what they're going to be going up against. But no, I mean, this is great. I've been, frankly, I'll call it now, Amazon's just going to end up buying Fresh Direct. They're just going to buy them. And I mean, even the name is similar. But, Google Express opened in new cities yesterday. Amazon Fresh is now in Brooklyn. And Webvan, freaking 15 years later, it's finally getting the last laugh, right? Webvan is like, see, we told you.
Right, from the grave. You can, if you
from the
listen
grave,
to it, you can hear it.
They're reaching out through the grave. They're going, come on.
SMH, shaking my head.
I used to love Webvan. Oh,
yeah,
well.
me too.
Well, in other news, a China Unicom branch in Shanghai, China, is offering to alter the pants of iPhone 6 Plus customers to make their pockets bigger.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a publicity stunt, obviously, and a good one, but it's not an original one. They apparently copied the idea from telco KPN in Amsterdam, which offered the same goofy service when the iPhone launched there. Wow.
Insert joke about Chinese knockoffs here.
Yeah, exactly.
And just leave it at that.
Perfect. Our TNT fan of the day is Joe Nardi in Chicago, who posted this picture on Google+. He's got a wall-mounted screen in the bathroom with a wireless waterproof speaker inside the shower. Perfect. He's got the sort of the screen like safely outside the glass door of the shower, and then the speaker in there blasting this show while he bathes.
Some thought went into that right there.
Some good, clean fun. How do you watch or listen to TNT? Just record a video or take a picture of your setup and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT, and we'll find it. That's the Tech News Today. Christina Warren, thank you so much for coming on this show and bringing your Mashable peeps with you. That was a great segment.
Right? I mean, come on. The Mashable party on TNT.
Awesome. Great. And what are you working on these days? What's next? What are you going to publish next? All
right. So I'm just finishing up. I do one every year, how to do a clean install of OS X Yosemite. That's going to go up in just a few minutes. The guy who has an app that makes it very simple. His web server went down when somebody linked to it early. So I'm actually hosting a mirror for him myself on S3. So I'm working on that. And then some follow-ups on the Apple Pay stuff, because that's an exciting announcement. We're all really looking forward to Monday.
Awesome. Really timely stuff. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. And you cut the OS X thing just before I was about to do it the wrong way. So I'm gonna read your article and do it the right way. Thanks for joining us And I always love it when you're on the show. You're a great co-anchor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, you can subscribe to Tech News Today on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Feedly, Yahoo, RSS, many other options. Choose your favorite at twit.tv/TNT. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV, and please send us your thoughts and opinions. You can send it via email at tnt@twit.tv or call us at 260-TNT-SHOW. You can leave a message. Nobody's going to answer the phone. We'll just record your voice and maybe play it on the air. Also, don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name's Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. And by the way, I have the week off next week. Leo and Sarah will be anchoring the show while I'm out, so have a great weekend, and I will see you a week from Monday.